This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Gunmen kidnap dozens of villagers in northwestern Nigeria. Economic agreements and Belt and Road Initiative high on Wang Yi's agenda in Syria. And South Africa's President Ramaphosa claims recent riots were planned. Welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. Also coming up on the program. In your business news, South Africa's production slows amid rise in infections and limited activity. And in sports, Al Ahly fans take to the streets of Cairo as the club wins its 10th CAF Champions League title. We begin this broadcast in Nigeria, where a police official says gunmen have kidnapped around 60 people. The armed men reportedly attacked 5 villages in the Shinkafi area located in the northwestern Zamfara state. The attack took place overnight on Friday, according to the regional police spokesperson. Several witnesses speaking to Reuters news agency described seeing the gunmen flee into a nearby forest. So far, 5 of those kidnapped have been released. Well, let's cross over to CGTN's Deji Badmus. He's in Lagos for us. Deji, what can you tell us about the latest kidnappings?
Well, Beatrice, what we're learning is that this attack was actually orchestrated by notorious bandits now in Zamfara state. His father was arrested in Kano state a couple of weeks ago, and in retaliation, he sent his boys to carry out this spree of kidnappings, if you like. I mean, attacking more than actually 5 villages. And unfortunately, what we understand is that he has threatened to continue the kidnappings until his father is released by security agents. Now, his father, by the way, was arrested in a bid to get him, and so he's actually threatened to continue this kidnapping now until his father is released. He said he's going to keep those he kidnapped until his father is released. And we understand he's actually written letters now to other villages that they should prepare for an imminent attack. And so what you have now is that quite a number of people are vacating their villages for fear that they may be attacked. It's a terrible situation. And the number of people kidnapped, from what we're learning, is far beyond the number that has been given. What we're learning from people around that area is that up to 150 persons may have been kidnapped from different villages in Zamfara state.
Well, Deji, the people, as you mentioned, are now quite fearful because armed robberies and kidnappings for ransom, particularly in the north, have become so frequent. And many are afraid to travel by road. What is the solution to this security problem, and why is the government seemingly unable to deal with it?
Now, let me answer that question, Beatrice, by rolling out some stats for you to really understand and for our audience to understand why Nigeria continues to face this challenge. As we speak today, from 1987 to date, Nigeria has spent less than 1% of its GDP now on funding the military. So that's a challenge. When just less than 1% of your budget now, less than 1% of that to the GDP is spent on the military, that is obviously a challenge. And then the number of active military personnel, and when I say active military personnel, I'm talking about the Navy, the Army now and the Air Force. The number of active military personnel at the disposal of the government to fight all of these security challenges is just estimated at around 120,000. Now, consider the size of this country. We're talking about a country that is close to 1 million square kilometers. It will be difficult to have just 120,000 military personnel now to provide effective security for a country as large as this. Then you look at the police personnel you have. Altogether, we understand it's around 370,000, but those who are actually available, the police personnel who are actually available to do actual policing work now is just in the region of 120,000. That too is a challenge. So clearly, the government would need to recruit more. The government would need to increase its military spending. In terms of technology, it's actually not there. So it's why the country is having to is facing this challenge now, if you like, and seemingly an enormous one. So it's a big challenge for the government. The government has said it's going to increase its spending on the military and security. Parliament has accepted to increase the budget. We're waiting to see when that happens. But the truth is that the country is currently struggling to deal with what I would call an unprecedented security challenge it is facing. Because this security challenge is not just restricted to the north. You also have it virtually everywhere in the country. So it's indeed a challenge. And unless that is resolved, the issue of funding and recruitment, it's difficult to see how the country will be able to deal with this. Beatrice?
Deji Badmus joining us there from Lagos. Thank you. The Chinese foreign minister has paid an official visit to Syria. High on Wang Yi's agenda are agreements aimed at boosting the Syrian economy. Zara Aldezi reports from Damascus.
For the first time since war began in 2011, China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi visits Syria. The two parties agreed on a new stage in bilateral ties and discussed Syria's involvement in China's Belt and Road Initiative for its geopolitical location and its senior role in the region.
The significance of the visit is highly symbolic, that it comes on the day of Assad's swearing-in ceremony, expressing those presidential elections in Syria are on international battles, not a local one. It also comes against the U.S. threats to all countries and striving to make Asia for all Asians under the Belt and Road Initiative and free of U.S. unilateralism.
China's foreign minister and his Syrian counterpart signed economic agreements for China's contribution to Syria's economy and rebuilding efforts that have ravaged the country.
We were waiting for such a visit. China can highly contribute in Syria because of Chinese companies' huge capabilities, solvency, and human resources to transfer technologies and strategic projects. We are hopeful that China's role in rebuilding will help with what the decade-long war has destroyed, including industrial cities and city centers.
Syria-China ties began in 1956, and it took a strategic turn after President Assad's visit to Beijing in 2004 that led to economic agreements. Since 2011, China has supported Syria politically at the United Nations by using its veto power and preventing any Western military intervention, as it made efforts to reach a political solution to end Syria's suffering.
The timing of the visit to Syria of China's foreign minister reflects the strength of bilateral ties between the two countries and China's commitment to help rebuild the war-ravaged country under Belt and Road Initiative. Zahra Derzi, CGTN, Damascus.
While the Chinese foreign minister has continued his tour and is now in Egypt, Adel Mahroui is standing by in New Alamein City, where meetings are set to take place. Adel, the Chinese State Councilor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi is now in Cairo. What's on his itinerary?
He has started already his meeting. Today, just about an hour ago, he met Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi for the first meeting by a foreign minister and a first visit by a foreign minister to New Alamein City, this flagship mega project on Egypt's Mediterranean Sea, and where the Egyptian president has been staying for some time and plans to have more of a governmental presence in the northwestern part of Egypt. Wang Yi then is currently meeting with Egyptian counterpart Sameh Shoukry. The two will be discussing regional crises. They will be discussing cooperation between Egypt and China, which has been significantly growing in recent years, especially under and during the COVID-19 pandemic. There is also a number of agreements between the two countries that both ministers will be signing just within the next few minutes.
So, Adel, what can we expect more? What more can we expect from the foreign minister's visit?
Well, Egypt is highly looking to China as a comprehensive strategic partner. The COVID-19 pandemic highlighted how both nations can support one another under the toughest circumstances. This month, Egypt has began producing Chinese COVID-19 vaccines domestically with a promise to fully transfer the vaccine production technology and the know-how to Egypt. And vaccine cooperation is expected to be among the agreements that both ministers will be signing. Besides that, China is heavily involved in Egypt's construction projects. It's building Africa's tallest iconic tower in the new Egyptian administrative capital, as well as the entire business district in this promising project that Egypt is investing in. China is leading the construction in that part. That's beside, of course, China's direct investments in Teda, in a Chinese industrial zone on the Red Sea. There are 96 corporate or enterprises in this industrial complex with investments of about $1.25 billion and revenues announced by the Chinese ambassador here in Cairo to have reached $2.5 billion and increasing. So the potential of cooperation between the two is immense, and both Egypt and China want to capitalize on the achievements they have made in the past years and build a better future with more cooperation and promising profits and benefits for everyone involved. The cooperation is not only to specify the benefits of Egypt. The Chinese vaccine production that is going on in Cairo will be a hub for vaccine production, and one of the agreements between Egypt and China is to make this production hub a supply and a support for all African nations that need COVID-19 vaccines.
Adel Mahroui joining us there from New Alamein City. Thank you. Now, South Africa continues to reel from violence that left over 200 people dead. Investigators now believe the riots were premeditated. The looting and riots were triggered by the arrest of former President Jacob Zuma. They then spread to Gauteng province, the country's main economic hub. President Cyril Ramaphosa visited KwaZulu-Natal, where the protests began. President Ramaphosa said the riots were an attempt to hijack South Africa's democracy. Officials have yet to release the names of those currently under investigations. However, authorities allege that those loyal to Zuma planned the violence. The ruling ANC party is currently split between supporters of Ramaphosa and those loyal to President Zuma.
There are long queues at malls and food stores in KwaZulu-Natal and parts of Gauteng as shortages are starting to hit the two provinces. People in communities hit by looting say they are running out of basic essentials like bread, milk and chronic medication. Panic buying across neighborhoods in Gauteng has seen popular grocery delivery services buckle under pressure. But the Consumer Goods Council of South Africa warns against panicking.
The food value chain is doing a lot in terms of ensuring that food reaches people. And we do have various NGOs in place in order to reach the critical communities where we have learned to maneuver around getting food to people. So all of those critical learnings of getting food to people that was utilized during the COVID situation would be plugged in to ensure that that is done.
The council acts as the representative body of the entire consumer packaged goods industry. Sitati says lessons learned while dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic are coming in handy.
I think COVID has taught us a lot to have contingency measures in terms of our sourcing of raw material and also our processing to ensure that with whatever that can hit us, we are able to proceed and feed the nation.
Meanwhile, Brand South Africa says the looting and the destruction has had a detrimental effect on the South African nation brand. The disorder started with protests against the arrest of former President Jacob Zuma, but soon degenerated into deadly and destructive rampages in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng provinces.
The brand promise itself remains. We are still who we are at the core. What has been compromised is the image of the brand at this point in time, and that is something that we need to manage. So what we would need our audiences and our core target market to understand is the fact that we remain a largely peaceful and stable environment.
Brand South Africa is an entity charged to promote the nation's brand image and reputation. Yolisan Jamila for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, for a closer look at this, I'm joined by Gabriel Kraus, a socio-political analyst at the Institute of Race Relations. He's joining us from Johannesburg. Gabriel, thank you for joining us on the program. Now, with food shortages being felt in parts of the country, what is the economic impact of the ongoing violence?
Still fires being put out and debris being picked up, supply chains being restored, it's impossible to yet have a complete tally of the economic damage that's been done. But BUSA Business Unity South Africa has estimated at least 5 billion rands damage to retail. Intellidex has estimated about 50 billion rands damage to the economy as a whole. To give a sense of perspective, that is about 1% of annual gross domestic product in South Africa. So the damage is huge. 200 malls at least have been looted, hundreds more shops burnt down completely. It is a dire situation, and I think especially when you consider that 1.4 million jobs were lost last year during the lockdown and the pandemic, 2 technical recessions in 2018, 2019, and decades of lost economic growth before that, putting us in a situation where most youth are unemployed in South Africa. This damage comes at an impossible time to deal with that in a humane and economically sustainable way, and yet we must.
Well, let's bring in CGTN's Angelo Coppola, who's been following the rioting and the developments in South Africa. Angelo, can you give us the latest on the violence across South Africa?
Well, the official update, Beatrice, was given by the President on Friday night, and that was when we heard about the 212 deaths that are related to arson and to the looting. 180 of those people are in KwaZulu-Natal, 32 in Gauteng. We do understand that the police services are investigating 131 murders and have opened 81 inquest dockets into those deaths that are related to the unrest. And a couple of hours after Ramaphosa's speech, at around midnight, in fact, on Friday night, Saturday morning, a task team of police, Metro cops and troops raided 3 men's hostels in the Johannesburg area. Those were considered to be staging areas for the looters. So they went in there, the authorities, to try and find out what's going on. We don't have any detail on the number of people that were arrested there or what was uncovered or discovered. The authorities do say that they have the matter under control, though, at the moment. So, like I said, 212 people confirmed killed, and 118 KwaZulu-Natal, the others, the 32 in the Gauteng area. Beatrice.
Well, Gabriel, you talked about, the country was already facing, a recession from last year because of the pandemic. There have been job losses. So we've seen a lot of images of looting in various towns in South Africa. How have businesses been affected, and what do they need to do now to recover?
I mean, businesses have been crushed. South Africans, businesses and private persons have been over indebted for years. And the recession, by the way, is not just from last year. It was 2018 and 2019. Lawlessness has been on the up too. Before the pandemic, we had 10 violent protests per day on average, according to the South African police, which is 3 times higher than a decade before. I think what businesses need to do is diagnose why South Africa was so ready to burn. Zuma might have been the spark, but it's the basic conditions of poverty and unemployment that have made this country into a tinderbox. And to address that, businesses are going to have to lobby, I think, for legal changes that allow people to protect their property in the face of a government that wants to take away all firearms for the purposes of self-defense, changes to protect property rights in the face of a government that is proposing expropriation of property without compensation on a national scale. And this is just a sort of minor thing that we've seen right now compared to that. And changes to laws that chase away foreign investors. For example, the race-based policies that chase away investors from Asia, Europe, and America. Investors that certainly have money that South Africans need to deploy right now to rebuild their businesses, to reestablish supply chains, and to get the wheels of the economy turning again. So I think business is going to have to try and avoid the kind of faction-fighting, internal ANC narrative that is important for police to investigate in terms of who instigated this, but not important for addressing the basic fundamentals that make South Africa such a poor and underdeveloped country over the last decade. That needs to be turned around for businesses to thrive.
All right, Gabriel Grouse and Angela Coppola joining us there from Johannesburg. To you both, thank you. Well, as South Africa emerges from a week of unrest, the country will today turn its attention to the annual Mandela Day efforts. The late Nelson Mandela led a revolution during 4 decades against a racially oppressive regime, becoming the first democratically elected president in 1994. On the 18th of July every year, citizens of the country dedicate 67 minutes of their time to good deeds in honor of the former statesman. This year, however, the country faces a mammoth task as it recovers from the chaos which has demolished food supply chains in parts of the country. CGTN's Julie Shire reports.
It will be a Mandela Day like no other. South Africans are scrambling to get food to disaster-hit areas, mainly in KwaZulu-Natal, after days of looting, arson and vandalism. The need for food in other communities is also dire since the COVID-19 lockdown was enforced almost 18 months ago. Cape Town-based charity Ladles of Love has made every day a Mandela Day.
We expanded exponentially. We went from a little soup kitchen doing about a ton of food a week. Within 3 months, we were doing 50 tons of food a week. We're serving around 30,000 people a day with food. We send these bulk supplies we've got about 300 soup kitchens around the peninsula. They cook the food and they serve it to the communities. And we're on over 18 million meals that we've served since COVID began.
Ladles of Love is encouraging South Africans to lend a helping hand where they can. The community-based organization is aiming to break a Guinness World Record by collecting 90,000 tins of canned beans covering 6.7 kilometers.
These cans can actually supply our beneficiaries. We have 125 and we're feeding hundreds and thousands of people a day. And these cans can add value and bulk into their pots.
Every Thursday we come here and we have goods, products given to us. We go back into the community and serve a number of people, even up to the average of 300-400 people that we serve with the food that we get here.
But with supply completely cut off in some areas due to unrest, there is concern, however, this will impact on charitable efforts.
The millions that have so little are going to have even less now. And that is what makes me truly sad. My concern is that we're going to feel the ripple effect of that as well, because a lot of our stuff comes from Durban. And so our supply is already starting to tell us there's going to be shortages. So we're going to probably have to cut back on supplies, because if prices go up, we need to reduce the parcels so that we can keep the food going out.
Communities across South Africa usually open their hearts on Mandela Day by giving their time, money and other donations. They now have to put together one of the biggest humanitarian efforts this country has ever seen to ensure millions don't go hungry in the next coming weeks. Julie Shire, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
You're watching Africa Live. Still ahead on the program. German Chancellor to visit disaster zone as a death toll in Germany and Belgium tops 180. And Mediterranean death numbers double in 2021 compared to the first half of 2020.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
I've been Tunis, Cairo, Juba, Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel will visit flooded areas in Germany on Sunday after the disaster in Western Europe left at least 183 people dead. Rescue crews have been racing to find survivors in Germany and Belgium, with hundreds still missing. In Germany, over 150 people have died in the country's worst natural disaster in more than half a century. Michael Voss has more.
The floodwaters are starting to recede across much of the worst affected regions of Western Europe, allowing residents to return and assess the damage, with clean-up operations now underway. Germany has suffered the highest death toll, and hundreds of people remain unaccounted for after devastating flash floods destroyed homes, cars, roads and bridges.
You don't expect people to die in a flood in Germany. You expect it maybe in poor countries, but you don't expect it here. But it was all too fast, too quick.
Emergency services, aided by the military, continue their desperate search for survivors, with fears that more bodies may be found in the cars and trucks that were swept away in the flash floods. Emergency relief supplies and other donations are starting to arrive, with hundreds of volunteers working round the clock in the town of Neuerberg to get help to those most in need.
If you wanted to see something positive about this whole catastrophe, then it's this wave of readiness to help. I think that's great.
Search efforts are also continuing in Belgium, where the death toll continues to rise. King Philippe and Queen Matilda visited Pepinster, near Liège, the country's worst affected region. The royal couple offered comfort to one local resident who was visibly upset at the damage done to the cafe she owned. Some of the worst flooding is now centred on the Netherlands, where thousands of people were forced to leave their homes on Friday as rising waters burst a dike and swollen rivers flooded low-lying towns. Switzerland is the latest country to be hit by these exceptional rainstorms, with serious flooding reported as several lakes and rivers started to overflow. As clean-up operations get underway, there are questions over the lack of advance warnings. The debate is also growing over the need for more urgent action on climate change to prevent such catastrophes from becoming more common. Michael Voss, CGTN.
The number of migrants and refugees who died while attempting to reach Europe on dangerous sea crossings more than doubled so far this year compared to the first 6 months of 2020. This was revealed in a new report by the United Nations Migration Agency, IOM. Despite the government's efforts, Tunisia remains one of the main departure points for migrants. Adnan Chauchi reports.
The Tunisian Red Crescent has reported hundreds of search and rescue operations near the coasts of Mediterranean cities in Tunisia since June. Last week, the Coast Guard recovered 8 bodies and rescued 43 African migrants.
The situation is very difficult. In just 2 weeks, the city of Zazes alone in southern Tunisia, the Navy made 400 search and rescue operations. Hundreds of similar operations also took place in other cities on the Tunisian coast. The number of irregular migrants is on the rise, and more people are reported dead or missing in the Mediterranean. Tunisia cannot control this wave of migration alone.
The IOM regional office in Zarzis revealed that the number of women and children among the rescued migrants has risen since the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic.
The IOM is hosting hundreds of irregular migrants from different nationalities and providing social and medical assistance. We have recorded a sudden increase in the number of women, pregnant women and children who need assistance after the rescue operations at sea.
At least 1,146 people died between January and June on sea routes to Europe, according to the International Organization for Migration. It says the actual number of deaths may be much higher, since many shipwrecks go unreported while others are hard to verify.
I speak on behalf of over 1,000 mothers who lost their children in irregular migration attempts. We do not know anything about the fate of our children from 2008 until recently. More than 10 Tunisian governments have failed to provide an answer on whether our children are dead or alive. Did they drown or get rescued by the Tunisian or Italian Navy?
IOM said the central Mediterranean route between Libya and Italy was the deadliest, followed by the stretch between West Africa and Spain's Canary Islands. During his last visit to Italy in June, Tunisian President Kais Saied discussed with his Italian counterpart the uptick in irregular migration and deaths in the Mediterranean basin. The Italian president expressed concern over the uncontrolled flow of irregular migrants. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Well, let's broaden this discussion a little bit more, and I'm now joined by Amira El Sayed, a political writer, analyst and writer and editor at the Egyptian Gazette based in Cairo. Thank you for joining us on Africa Live. So why is this migrant situation in North Africa very worrying?
Actually, North Africa, unfortunately, has been plagued and plunged into political instability, especially in the wake of the Arab Spring and the ouster of many governments in North Africa. And usually people and citizens, they are bearing the brunt of such political instability. They are putting their lives in jeopardy in order to seeking a better life in other countries. And definitely also this has impacted the European Union relations in Africa, as now the European Union is trying to strike a balance between, for example, ensuring and protecting the asylum seekers and migrants, and also defending the outer borders of the European countries. And we have seen that in 2015, for example, this issue have been given a top priority in Europe. We have seen, like in Salzburg Summit, and also the regulations like Dublin regulations, all these activities or events seek to manage the migrant flow. And also we have seen also the recent report issued by the Amnesty International that shed light on the suffering of the migrants who have been exposed to torture or arbitrary detention. So definitely the situation of migrants in North Africa has reached alarming levels. Yeah.
Amira, so the European Union is trying to strike a balance, but what is the long-term solution to this problem, and how can this problem really be solved?
Actually, people's safety should be given a top priority. Many people have lost their lives while trying, for example, to cross the Mediterranean. So there should be a collective action toward this issue. This issue should be tackled from a holistic perspective. And also there should be more political compromise in order to restore political stability in North Africa. All countries should uphold their obligations according to the international law to keep people's safety. There shouldn't only be focused on how to control the migrants flow, but there also should be more measures to ensure the safety of those people.
Amira El Sayed joining us there from Cairo. Thank you. Chinese President Xi Jinping recently addressed the informal economic leaders' retreat of APEC. In his speech, he urged members of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation to enhance solidarity in the fight against COVID-19. President Xi also touched on the need to support the global economic recovery. To achieve this, he highlighted the need to boost the digital infrastructure. Earlier, we spoke to a Zambian economist to get his take on President Xi's speech.
China is one of those countries that has really made huge steps in terms of developing technologically. And the fact that President Xi Jinping is encouraging that regional integration, even other countries within the region will be able to benefit from the progress that China has been able to make in line with technology, and also embracing digital platforms for conducting business.
Shanghai's newly built astronomy museum has opened its doors to the public. It is touted to be the largest in the world, covering 38,000 square meters. Wu Lei takes us on a tour.
How big is our solar system? Are we alone in the universe? These are just some of the questions I've asked myself since childhood. Today I come to this world's largest astronomy museum to try and find out some answers. This is the first zone of exhibition named Homeland, which shows all the planets in our solar system. Look at the Earth and Moon. The size of them is close to their real proportions. Here are some 70 meteorites, including some from the Moon and Mars. Look at this one. a 21.4 kilogram specimen from a meteorite called Changxing. It fell onto a farm on Changxing Island in 1964, and the piece in this museum is the largest of them all. There is a belt region around each star called the habitable zone, where the temperature is moderate. This is where our Earth is located. Scientists say being in the habitable zone doesn't necessarily mean a world has the right conditions to support life. They are still researching the possibility of life on other planets. Here at the Odyssey Zone, there are 120 rare collections of artifacts, books, and telescopes showing the history of human space observation. Here's the Yu-22 rover and Chang'e 5 lunar probe show the highlights of China's lunar space programs, but let me try these virtual reality goggles. After wearing this goggle, I'm now roaming on the moon. I can jump to move forward. Okay. This is a really exciting experience. I think visitors will love it. This is a precise model of China's Tianhe core module. 3 technonauts are now working on the Tianhe core module in space. But visitors can come here and take a closer look at how technonauts eat, sleep, grow plants, and do all kinds of experiments in space. From this Sunday on, 6,000 visitors will be allowed in here each day. But what exactly is a parallel universe, and how would things look beyond our own universe? This tour has left me with even more questions. But one thing for certain, exhibition like this helps us learn more about the past, present, and future. Because after all, exploring the unknown is part of human nature. Wu Lei, CGTN, Shanghai Astronomy Museum.
Well, your business news is coming up next. Here's what's ahead. South Africa's production slows amid a rise in infections and limited activities. And Uganda's coffee exports hit a record high of 6 million bags, earning $600 million in revenue.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
South Africa's manufacturing production declined in May for a second month in a row. According to Statistics South Africa, the sector was down 2.6% from April. The industry was showing steady growth since lockdown restrictions were eased last year. But with a severe third wave of COVID causing a rise in infections, activity has been limited. Rioting and looting in parts of the country is also expected to severely impact the manufacturing industry going forward. Here's Sumitra Naidu.
The ongoing looting in South Africa's Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal provinces is a major setback for the economy. The manufacturing industry is the second largest employer in South Africa. It is already feeling the impacts of the rioting related to former President Jacob Zuma's jailing last week. A number of big factories and warehouses have been burnt, machinery and equipment destroyed or stolen.
The manufacturing sector, as you rightly note, is a fundamentally important component of our economy. It's really the engine of growth for our economy. It employs a significant amount of people. Last quarterly labour force statistics, just over 1.5 million employees, contributes approximately 11% to our GDP.
Manufacturing is very important in the context of a country like ours, a developing economy with high levels of unemployment. Needs sectors like manufacturing because of the multiplier effect that manufacturing has on the different variables that are linked to manufacturing.
Petrol stations inland are running dry after a major oil refinery suspended operations this week. The demand for fuel is likely to push inflation up. Rising input costs are also likely to delay a full recovery in the manufacturing sector.
It will massively affect, as I said, supply chains. You have to move the goods to the market, and you also have to move the raw materials to the production base. So that is a major significant issue that at play now. We've also seen disruptions slightly coming in from the transport service business. Most of the trucks have now been kept on the bay because of the security concerns.
Meanwhile, COVID is still hampering efforts to ramp up production. Thousands are dying from the more severe Delta variant. The recent move to tougher lockdown restrictions will reverse some of the gains.
If you look at the year-on-year change, manufacturing was up by about 35.3% in May compared to May last year. So on a year-on-year basis, numbers were positive, although the outcome was slightly below our expectations. So we had expected 40% year-on-year, and Bloomberg consensus had an expectation of 46% year-on-year.
According to Stats SA, 6 out of 10 subsectors under manufacturing showed growth in the first quarter of this year, suggesting a more positive outlook. Sumitra Nadu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Uganda's coffee exports have hit a record high of 6 million coffee bags, the highest total exports recorded in a single year in 3 decades. The latest figures from the state-run Uganda Coffee Development Authority show the country earned close to $600 million in June 2021, compared to about $495 million last year. CGTN's Hilary Eyesiga reports.
Uganda is beginning to see a payoff in coffee exports. The country's Coffee Development Agency recorded a 19% increase in exports in June this year. The rise in exports is attributed to the newly planted coffee trees, which have started to yield, supported by favorable weather.
The revenues from coffee has been largely from Robusta, because that's where we have had big increases. We have been, in this financial year, we've been in a fry crop.
Coffee promoters say the rise in prices at the global level have also encouraged exporters to release their stock. Much of Uganda's coffee is going to Europe, but the COVID-19 pandemic restrictions are slowing down the coffee trade. Uganda has been under lockdown for a month now, and transporting coffee out of the farm is now a challenge.
Most of the farmers are stuck with a lot of stock from the previous harvest. And that affects them because that is an entire chain. How are they going to pay all these workers? Because workers still have to harvest that coffee. Workers still have to do the entire thing. How are they going to pay them? Because even us that are buying coffee from them, the market demand is not something that we expected.
Uganda's target is to produce more than 20 million bags by 2035. The country's coffee agency is hopeful that it could see an increase in coffee exports, driven by the increasing global coffee prices because of a reduced harvest from Brazil and Vietnam, who are the top coffee producers. Hilary Eyesiga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Egypt has signed 2 agreements with the US-based Bechtel Corporation for the design and construction of the largest petrochemicals complex in Africa. The refinery will cost $7.5 billion and will be located on the Red Sea's Ain Sokna economic zone. From Cairo, here is Yasser Hakim with the details.
The deals with the US-based company Bechtel, in partnership with Egypt's state-owned petroleum engineering companies MP and Petrojet, require them to prepare the engineering and design work for the petrochemicals project. It will also form the coalition that will construct the mega complex in Ain Sokna economic zone on the Red Sea.
We have always suffered from the availability of petrochemical products that are used in many industries. We import 90% of polyethylene and other products at billions of dollars annually. But with the natural gas discovered lately, the country is now able to produce petroleum products using natural gas.
The factory will produce polyethylene, polypropylene, polyester, and ship fuel and other products as well. They will be used in several industries such as fertilizers and detergents. There are 9 petrochemical plants in Egypt and 2 are under construction. The largest is Al Tahrir complex, to be built by Bechtel.
The Al Tahrir complex in Ain Sokna that will be ready in 2024 will produce 4 million tons of petrochemicals for the local market and for export, ranking about $8 billion worth of exports per year. The strategy is to revert to added value projects by manufacturing petroleum products and petrochemicals that would reduce imports, especially fuel and diesel, which to date are a big burden on the state budget.
Egypt's petroleum products import bill has dropped from $9.4 billion to $6.3 billion in the last year. The North African country plans to reach self-sufficiency in this sector by 2023. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Well, let's now take a look at your sports news. Here's what's ahead. Al Ahly fans take to the streets of Cairo as the club wins its 10th CAF Champions League title.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find the game.
We begin our sports with football news, where the Egyptian side Al Ahly sealed a record-extending 10th African Champions League title after beating the 10-man Kaizer Chiefs of South Africa 3-0 in Saturday's final in Casablanca, Morocco. The Egyptian fans took the streets in Cairo, celebrating their club's record-extending Al Ashra, meaning the 10th Champions League title. Second half goals from Mohamed Sherif, Mohamed Magdi and Amir El Sulaya were enough to see out the South African side. Last night's victory makes Al Ahly the first club to win back-to-back Champions League titles 3 times. The Egyptian Giants will now be Africa's representative for a second year running at this year's FIFA Club World Cup that will be held in Japan.
This is the best day of my life. Al Ahly won the 10th. It's a beautiful day for me and my friends. 3 wonderful goals. The match started roughly, but gradually Al Ahly managed to gain control. It was wonderful to see my team win 2 consecutive titles. In less than 1 year, Al Ahly reached the final twice. They are such a strong team.
Al Ahly's best coach since Jose is Mosemane. Their tactics greatly matured. It's the first time I see Al Ahly play the game wonderfully. This is the best football display for Al Ahly. Winning is not an easy craft. Today's match was one of the best matches Al Ahly played.
This is an indescribable feeling. The team I've been supporting since I was a kid has brought us 10 Champions League trophies. I used to love Mosimane before he joined Al Ahly. He is a coach that has restructured Al Ahly. The team has a strong defense line, midfield and offensive power. They are unbeatable. Al Ahly is the king of Africa. Winning is a norm for this team.